Good evening to everyone. My name is Jackie Betts. I'm the city administrator, and joining me tonight is our finance consultant, Kathy Brucker. And we're very excited to talk to you tonight about the city's money and the budgeting process for that. The first thing that I would like to do, instead of doing a roll call vote, however, if you want to say, hi, I'm here, that would be great. But let's call out the members of our budget committee. And so I have Sierra Cook.
Hi, I'm here.
Hi, Sierra. Michael Milch.
Hi, I'm here.
Hello, Michael.
Hello.
Riley Hartman.
I am present.
Hi, Riley.
Hello.
Neil Reisner. I think Neil is jumping off a previous meeting, so he probably will be joining us pretty soon. Christy Halley Schaefer.
Yo.
Hi, Christy.
Hey.
Whoa. Hey, before you go on, sorry, this is Neil. I'm here.
Hi, Neil.
I'm just using an old computer that is slow.
That's okay.
Thank you.
Tanya Naff. Let's try Randy Ripley.
Yes, I am here.
Hi, Brandy.
Hello.
Greg Alexander.
Yes.
Hi, Greg.
Hi.
Matt Tracy. He said that he may be late joining us tonight. Anessa Hartman.
Here, hello.
Hi, Anessa. Tracy Todd is working late and she will join us later. Mindy Garlington.
Here.
Hi, Mindy.
Hi.
Tammy Stimple.
I'm here too.
Hi there, Tammy. All right. You are the Gladstone Budget Committee that's going to help us through the next biennium budget. We appreciate you very much for volunteering to do this very big responsibility for the city of Gladstone. It was just most recently that we changed to doing a biennium budget. And the last time that we did one, Kathy was with the city and helped us through that process as well. And so what we wanted to do tonight is just kind of give you an overview of what budget law is for governments. There's no decisions being made. We're not going through any of the city's financial or budget proposals, but we wanted to give you kind of what we call our Budget 101 class. And so Kathy has put together a very thoughtful presentation, and probably what works best on Zoom is if you allow us to go ahead and go through the full presentation, and then we'll open it up for questions at the end of that. Now, I also wanted to let all of you know that if you'd like a copy of the presentation afterwards, you can let myself or Haley know, and we will print a copy for you. It will be available on the website as well. So I think with that, Kathy, you want to get started?
Yes, I sure will. Thank you, Jackie. Good evening to everybody, and I hope you find this at least somewhat interesting. Budget is kind of a dry subject, there's no doubt. One thing I did want to remind you of is we had sent this, this local budgeting in Oregon pamphlet along with the agenda, and it's basically a guide for elected officials. So if this gets a little confusing, please refer to that also. It's got some great information and it's written in just a very, very good format. So anyways, to get us started tonight, oops, oh dear, that wasn't the way I wanted to get us started tonight. Hang on, here we go, there. So what is local budget law? It is established under Oregon Revised Statutes, Chapter 294. It was last revised in either late 2013 or 2014. It's standardized statewide for almost all entities. The differences that you'll see in various budgets result from the size, the purpose, and the complexity of whatever local government it is it's crossing. It explains the entity and the fiscal policies that frames the budget, strongly encourages citizen participation throughout the whole process. It's based on estimates of resources and expenditures that must balance overall to each other. It ensures the control of spending as adopted by the governing board, you, the city council, at the final stage. And again, it's ORS chapter 294-316, if you're ever interested, lists all of the excluded entities from Oregon budget law. One of them, the final one listed, are historic ghost towns. So fortunately, they don't have to worry about all of this too much. So going to our next one, what is a budget? It's a financial plan for the city. It's a biennium budget that will run from July 1, 2021 through June 30th, 2023. A fiscal period is only 1 year, but our budget will contain 2 fiscal years. Each fiscal year, 21-22 and 22-23, will have annual financial reports completed and audits conducted after the close of each individual year based on actual data. But the budget itself is based on estimated revenues and expenditures and with lawful appropriations defined to ensure that the public that funds are spent prudently. Going into our next one, there we are. The 4-phase process of the budget. So tonight we'll review the 4-phase process involved. And it starts off with the budget committee will review the proposed budget as presented by staff and then take public comment. Then the budget committee will approve the recommendation of the budget for adoption by the city council. The city council will adopt the budget, again with public comment, before the end of the current fiscal year, which is of June 30th, 2021. During the budget period, any changes that are made after the adoption are tightly controlled by local budget law as to the method used and the amounts allowed. Going in, it all starts with the budget calendar. And this is normally approved by the city council in February of the year, the current year prior to it starting. This lays out the meeting dates, the publication dates, and then the necessary filings with the county assessor to levy our property taxes. This same calendar applies to the Urban Renewal Agency budget also, which is published separately from the city.
And I'm not sure if all of the budget committee members got a copy of the calendar. So that is something that we're going to send to you because we need to make sure that you have the May 3rd and May 17th dates on your calendar. Those are when the public meetings will be. So we'll go ahead and send you a copy of the calendar if you do not have it.
So the proposed budget is prepared and presented by fund. Every local government operates under fund accounting, and each fund is its own independent, self-balancing, standalone entity, never more evident than during the budget process. Each fund must be budgeted and balanced. Resources always must equal appropriations. All estimates must be based on the best known information at the time. It's developed internally based on previous data or external input, such as the state revenue sharing estimates that we get. Our fund types. These are established for specific activities or purposes. The city's fund types are the general fund, the main operating fund. Then we have the special revenue funds, urban sharing, road and street fund, and the 2 levy funds. Debt service funds are normally used for general obligation, payment of general obligation debt, and currently the city has none of that, so you won't see any of those. And again, as we say, the URA is included in this discussion, but the budget itself is issued separately. More fund types that we have are the capital projects funds. enterprise funds for your sewer, water, and storm, and then an agency fund for the municipal court. So you're each accounted for a little differently with the annual financial statements, depending on the fund type that they are, but are all budgeted in exactly the same method. So there's real consistency when you're looking at them in the budget document. As always, with any of them individually and overall, estimated resources minus estimated appropriations must equal 0. They're totally self-balancing. Any excess funds that we may have are held within the contingency appropriation line item on the appropriation side.
And I think the important thing we want to make sure you understand is that the city just doesn't have one big checking account. We have certain funds and we can only spend revenues out of certain funds. And so you're going to learn about what kinds of programs that we allocate from the general fund, how our water, sewer, and stormwater funds are operated. And so that's the important distinction, is to understand that not all of the city's funds is in one account.
Exactly. So we start off then with a standardized format. We send out initial worksheets to all of the departments. We ask them to develop their current year estimates as far as what they think they're going to be spending by the end of that year. Internally at finance, we go ahead, estimate our revenues, et cetera. And that comes down to the future, to develop the current year estimates for the future year resources and appropriations. So this is the starting balance of the whole thing. And it's very critical that we try to get it as accurate as possible on that. For the preparation of the budget, the following slides will explain the basis for some of these projections. Basically, the beginning balance, we project the revenues for each fund, projects the transfers to and from each fund, expenditures for each fund, coming down to the ending balance. One thing we did want to point out to you is that this year we have developed more of an allocation method, which comes in under the transfers to and from funds. It's a method of distributing the costs incurred by all, but paid by the general fund, such as administrative services for human resources, finance, et cetera. So we're implementing a cost allocation structure for transfers over to the other funds. So there is some revenue recouped back into the general fund to offset these costs. We started that last year with our last budget period with information technology, but now we're developing it a little bit further. So our beginning fund balance is we project the beginning fund balance per fund, calculated by the current year estimates of revenue and expense to arrive at the beginning balance, which you most definitely want to have a positive beginning fund balance. This is estimated about 7 months before the end of the current year. So it's kind of a tricky calculation, but we do our very best to consistently and constantly look at it and revise it if necessary. And for biennium budgeting, the equation will span both years consecutively. So we start at the beginning of one year, add all of the inputs and the known information, and we take that through both years to come out with our ending fund balance as of the second year. On the revenues, all revenues are projected based on analytics, historical trending, or external information received, such as the assessed values for property tax collections. That, of course, is a number that's supplied by the county. The city's main sources of revenue are divided into these categories. And I'll go over the categories a little bit more in the next slides. We have our taxes. The types of taxes that we have are property taxes that are based on the city's permanent rate of 4.8174 per thousand of assessed value. Local option taxes were voted in for the police levy of 0.68 per thousand and the fire levy of 0.31 per thousand. Then as an aside, the urban renewal sharing agency is 1.0284 per thousand there. GO bonds must be voted on by the Gladstone community for a specific purpose. But again, as I said, the city has none of those at this time. Transient lodging taxes that were voted in, approved by the council a few years back, 6% on hotels, motels, and other short-term rentals of less than 30 days. So we also have that included under our local taxes. For our property taxes, as I say, the county assessor will annually verify the tax rates and the levies submitted by each local taxing district. So basically they come back saying, the previous year assessed value was this amount, and then we build off of that for the following year. This verified levy is the starting point. Coming in to estimate that, Measure 50 limits and the assessed value are subject or allowed statutorily to have a 3% increase per year on the existing unchanged property. Any addition to the 3% is only realized from new construction or boundary growth within the city. So this is the only way taxes may increase. The permanent base rate will never increase. It's strictly based on increases by that assessed value. Other rates may change based on voter approval, such as the levies or the GO bonds. And also, after we make that calculation on what the levied amount with the growth rate factored in, and then we assume a 95% collection rate. Eventually, you get almost 99% of property taxes, but within that first year, your basic, we historically collect 95% of it.
That's a great percentage.
It is. It's excellent. Clackamas County does a very good job on that. So estimating the tax, if the Measure 5 limit is exceeded, the city would reduce tax collections due to compression. I'm sure you're all familiar with this as far as the $5 per thousand for education, $10 per thousand for general government. An important factor to note is that is based on the real market value, not the assessed value. As far as the compression factor that can come into play, fortunately, we haven't lost much from that. In 2020, it was less than $3, and 2021 is forecast to be less than $21.
No compression issues.
No compression issues, yes, it's very good. With the budget requirements, and coming over to the expenditure side of life here, and this is, they're categorized into these object classifications. For the appropriations, personnel related costs, pretty self-explanatory. Operating costs, of course, cover all the materials and services. Infrastructure, vehicles and equipment, that's our capital outlay section, and then repayment of debt or debt service there. The requirements also to include the transfers out, as we just spoke about, payments to other funds for services, the operating contingency, which is basically a rainy day fund for unforeseen needs, the unappropriated ending fund balance and the reserve for future expenditures are set aside monies if they are available for use in future budget cycles. And like revenues, expenditures are projected based on analytics, historical trending, or external information received. Then we get into the important part of the publication for the public notification. In our meeting notices, there are various methods of publication that are allowed, and it's a very, very important step in this whole process. It's the start of the public notification process. This is something that the auditors check on every single budget cycle to ensure that you have handled them in a timely and timely manner as called out for in local budget law. These will advertise where, when, and if public comment is allowed at that particular meeting. We can either print it in a newspaper, mail it first class to each street address, which is done in a very small community, or hand delivery. We can also print it in the newspaper and post it concurrently on the website. And that is the method that City of Gladstone has been using the past 2 budget periods. It's published not less than 5 days nor more than 30 days so that it doesn't fly under the radar. We want the public to see this and to know what's happening. Phase 2 of the Budget Committee consists of the governing body plus an equal number of appointed electors. The appointed members cannot be employees, agents, or officers of the city, and you serve for staggered 4-year terms. And all members of that Budget Committee have the same authority. If the committee is unable to fill all appointed electors, it may operate on less members. We just have to make a proportionate adjustment to the majority count.
Basically what that means, all members have the same authority, is that our elected officials are now part of the Budget Committee. So all of you are Budget Committee members while you're on this role here.
And some of the duties of the Budget Committee is you're going to be receiving the budget document. You're going to be hearing the budget message. You'll hear and consider the public comment. Discuss and revise the budget as needed, approve the budget, and approve the property taxes. So Jackie and I consider this basically the most important slide of the whole presentation.
Yes.
Because this truly speaks to the heart of it. And we'll go through these in a little more detail of what we need you here for and why we appreciate your service on this. So on your Budget Committee, all meetings of the Budget Committee are open to the public. It'll allow public comments at one or more of the meetings. The Budget Committee the budget becomes a public document when released to the committee. Quorum is required to conduct business, hear testimony, and take action. And the quorum, as I was saying, is a majority of the committee members. And all of this is keeping in line with the ORS requirement for the public transparency. One more. On the committee process continuing at the first meeting, you'll elect a chair and a vice chair. You'll receive the budget, hear the budget message, which will explain the document, describe financial policies of the city, and explain changes from the prior year. You'll allow public comment if this is the committee's only meeting. And when I did mention here that you'll receive the budget, you will actually receive the proposed budget document a minimum of a week and possibly longer before that first meeting. So you really have some time to go through and look at it and develop any of your questions or et cetera. So it's not the night of the meeting that you will get the actual document.
And the budget message really is something that will come from me, but it'll be part of your budget that you receive. And it's really supposed to give you snapshots of where you need to be paying attention to throughout the document.
And then more of the committee process for that evening, you'll review the budget and make any changes as appropriate, determine taxes needed to balance, approve the budget and the tax levy by motion and vote of majority. And then our city recorder will be there to keep minutes, record motions made, and the votes taken. Then you'll move on to approve the budget and tax levy. A majority of the committee must approve the motion. The Budget Committee approves the proposed budget, and once approved, then the Budget Committee's work is complete until the next budget cycle. Then after you have approved the budget to move on to the City Council, we will take care of preparing all the needed noticing and the forms for the adoption of the approved budget by the governing body. Again, we'll be advertising that this will be happening. There will be forms published in the local newspaper explaining what the budget amounts are, the time and place of the hearing, and the location where it can be reviewed before the hearing. The governing body at that point now coming over to the City Council, We'll hold the budget hearing and hear testimony from any interested party if there is further comment. Consider the budget committee work and the public comments and deliberate, then adjust any budget estimates or proposed taxes and may increase expenditures. But if that does happen, then if expenditures in any fund increase by more than 10% or 5,000, or if the rate or amount of tax increases by any amount, then it must be republished in the local newspaper and hold another public hearing on it. And again, this is ensuring full transparency to the public.
You know, in my experience, I have never had a budget committee approve a document, and then when it gets to the city council, they do something entirely different. So it's very rare that that happens, but they do have an allowance for that if it's 10% or $5,000 more greater.
The adopt and appropriate, impose, and categorize. And that is what the council will be doing with those at that final meeting for the budget adoption. It'll have to be held after the budget hearing and before July 1 to enact the resolutions or ordinances. Ordinances to, as they say, adopt the budget, make the appropriations, impose the tax that's going to be levied for the city and for the Urban Renewal Agency, and categorize the tax just as far as to satisfy the county.
And on the budget calendar that you will get, we have allocated the second meeting in June to be when the city council will consider adoption. So we're right on our timeline and target for getting that approved.
Certification, once it's adopted, we certify the intent to impose taxes to the county assessor by July 15th. We have to submit the tax certification form, the resolution statements. If there had been any successful new ballot measure, that would also have to be certified or sent in and submitted at that time. The county clerk receives all the information above, plus a copy of the complete budget document by September 30th. And of course, that sets up then the assessment of the new taxes for all county residents, Gladstone residents, et cetera, for as of October when they're billed out by the county. Changes after adoption. This is always a tricky one that if these do happen once the fiscal year commences, we really are very conscientious about following local budget law and ensuring that we're handling them in the proper way. Again, this is something that's very closely monitored by the auditors after the end of a fiscal year. So sometimes when circumstances require changes to the adopted budget, ORS has strict rules regarding the whys, whens, and methods that are allowed to change an adopted budget. And how these budgets can change. In order to change an adopted budget, specific guidelines must be followed, and all changes to budget must be approved by council. Some of the different mechanisms that are used and why they may be used are, I skipped a slide there, back to here. On these are some exceptions that are allowed, and they may be passed by budget resolution, but again, the city council is made aware of these and approves them. On a specific purpose grant, if we get a grant after the start of the budget year that we had no idea, no ability to anticipate, that is an exception to one of the exceptions for an allowable under a budget resolution. If we had to fund unforeseen occurrence or service, if there was some unfunded mandate that came down from the federal government or the state that we had to carry out, as long as we have a revenue source to be able to do that with, then that would also be done by a budget resolution explaining exactly what's going on. Then we get into resolution transfers. These are transfer appropriations between the funds or within a fund after budget's been approved during the fiscal year. These are strictly going from one existing appropriation to another, such as department to department within the general fund or from fund over to another fund. The explanation is necessary within the resolution, and it must keep the budget at existing levels. There's no increase at all. So obviously it's not necessarily providing new revenues, it's just moving funding appropriation from one place to another for specific reasons. Such as contingencies, the total of transfers cannot exceed 15% of appropriation in the fund without a supplemental budget. So it goes from basically one level to a higher level. General fund to another fund, that can be done through resolution transfer. No resolution can transfer from any other fund without a supplemental budget. We can go from general fund to streets and roads, but we cannot take streets and roads back to the general fund unless there is a supplemental. Pass-through adjustments, resolution to appropriate excess tax when known. You'd have new revenues, you recognize those revenues, and you formally enact the resolution to be able to utilize those revenues if necessary. On a supplemental budget, these are adjustments that have more requirements and may or may not have public hearing requirements attached to them. They're mainly utilized when there is an unforeseen circumstance that requires the increase of the total budget offset by a specific revenue source. And those ones all listed there are you must fall into one of those categories in order to be able to utilize a supplemental budget. For the supplemental budget restrictions, as they say, as it shows there, it must be adopted before the expenditure. It can make fixes to the current fiscal year levy only. So we would not make one in the first year of this biennium for the second year of the biennium. It would be year to year specific. Not allowed if the condition was known during regular budget process. So that is one of the reasons why it is so important to try and anticipate every situation when you're in the process of preparing the budget itself. It cannot be used for an increased tax levy, and that's basically, of course, because you cannot just raise the tax levies unless there was a September local option tax that was approved, something like that. You cannot transfer funds from the unappropriated ending fund balances except as provided by law. Those are very, very unusual, unforeseen circumstances if you are taking it out of unappropriated ending fund balance, such like COVID would have been a good example of that, you know, a disaster that was no way anticipated and you needed to move monies for that. So as I say, it's one of the reasons why we try to anticipate anything we can during the formulation of the budget. Supplemental budget process also requires that you look at the amount of money that you are moving and how will it affect the overall fund expenditure balance. If you go less than 10%, it's a public notice, the resolution is done, and we do have to publish notice of that, this is going to be entertained at a city council meeting for approval. If it's 10% or more, we not only need to go through those hoops, but we also need to add the public hearing requirement before the adoption of it. And wow, okay, that sums it up. Local budget law, it's confusing, but when we break it down by steps, it does supply a complete, transparent process that will ensure that we are good stewards of public funds. Yeah, thank you very much for your attention to this. And if you have any questions at all, I am more than happy to take any questions or provide any further information on this, as is Jackie. And as I say, as Jackie was saying earlier, all of this information will be on the website too. So thank you for your attention. I do appreciate it.
Okay, I think Councillor Garlington has a question.
I do. On slide number 65 or 35, can you give specific examples of that?
What a supplemental budget is for, or what?
Well, below it lists like 5 or 6 different things that I'm not looking at it now. I'm sorry.
Oh, okay, that's okay. Yes, I understand what you're asking.
What would one of those things be?
An unknown condition during the budget process. One of those would be, as I say, the example of COVID.
COVID was the big one.
Yeah, so if that impacts our budget and we're going to go over appropriations or something like that, we need to do a supplemental budget. In fact, towards the end of the year, you will see one that will most likely be coming through for that. Unknown state or federal funds available. The CARES Act funding, again, that was COVID related, but say we secured a federal grant for sewer work, something such as that. It would have been unknown prior to the beginning of when we were formulating the proposed budget. We got, say, in the second year of the biennium. Then we would do a supplemental budget adjustment to the revenues to recognize that and to the appropriations to be able to spend it. That's another example. Proceeds from destruction or sale used for replacement item. When we sold the fire truck last year, or I guess it was this year, when actually it was as of June 30th of last year, but when that was sold, if we had wanted to utilize those funds for something else right away, we would have had to have done a supplemental budget adjustment, recognizing the revenue and recognizing the appropriation to spend that revenue. Okay. Significantly more tax money received if for some, say the city of Gladstone annexed a large area and more tax monies was coming into it. And that was done after the start of the biennium period. Then we would want to recognize that to utilize it for something. So does that give you some examples there?
Yes, yes, thank you, yes.
Welcome.
I had a question, if you don't mind.
Yeah, Haley, do you want to kind of monitor that for us? It's hard for us to see who has the questions. You can just know who the next one is.
Of course, Greg Alexander is actually the next one.
Okay, I just saw, we were going through those slides, I saw that ORS 294.450, the resolution transfers.
Uh-huh.
I was just wondering, so is it, I mean, there are a lot of moving parts. So say once the Civic Center is paid for, can we take the money from the Urban Renewal Fund and redirect it to the general fund, or how's that work?
No, that is definitely not allowed because the Urban Renewal District is formed under a separate set of ORS, and the funds that are in there will be utilized to pay off that debt service. If there are any excess funds that are left over, we'll have to get legal opinion on what we could use it for at that time. Jackie, do you have anything more to add to that?
No, I think that's the correct answer. That sums it up. Yes.
Yes. So no, we would not be able to send it to the general fund.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
I think Sierra Cook was next.
Hi, I have a few questions. So kind of piggybacking off of what Councilor Garlington was asking about the supplemental funds, is there a mechanism or what mechanism is there to change large expenditures when there's urgent action required and there may not be time for a resolution? Is there a mechanism for something like that? I'm kind of thinking a recent example might be the storm debris pickup. I know the city managed the storm debris pickup, which was a large expenditure, which couldn't have been foreseen. What budget mechanism is at play for a situation like that?
For that situation, there were sufficient operating funds within streets and roads to be able to cover that appropriation. What will end up happening is that there may be a little less spent on some other material and service line item in order to be able to cover that. This kind of brings up the whole subject of how we actually adopt the budget. And we adopt it by department or by fund. And the categories of personal services, materials and services, and capital outlay are adopted as one lump sum. And what that does, it allows the manager or the department head to be able to utilize their funds in the best way necessary. The storm debris is an excellent example of that. So we put excess funds needed for capital, and it's included in that overall adopted amount. If we need to use more in materials and services, we may have to use a little less as far as for capital, and that's how it would cover that type of situation. If it's extremely costly, like the whole COVID situation, that then is backed up with a budget adjustment. But for those types of emergency coverages, so to speak, we usually can handle it within the departmental appropriation.
Great, okay. I have another question as well. You know, you mentioned that the budget committee would receive a copy of the budget at least a week prior to the budget meeting.
Yes.
If we have questions, you know, we review that budget, we have questions about individual items. Is that something that we should give the city a heads up on beforehand about our individual questions so they could come prepared, or should we just wait until the meeting itself?
No, I think that's a great question. First of all, after you receive your budget and you go through it and you're like, oh my gosh, I don't know how to read this. You can set up a time with Kathy and myself to go through it. Then if you have questions, what we've done in the past is we have emailed those questions to all of the committee members so they know what questions are being asked, and then we provide the answers. It really depends on how many questions you have. If there's maybe only 2 or 3, we will go ahead and get those to you before we have the budget committee meeting. But if you have, let's say 10 or 15, we will answer all of them, but we will present them at the budget meeting that night. It's going to depend on how many of you have those, but we typically like to make sure that if one member asks a question, that everybody gets the question and the answer. So we're comfortable doing what's best for each of you individually because we want you to feel prepared when you come to have the budget meeting.
Excellent, thank you. And I have one final question. I'm so sorry, I'm new to this process, so I appreciate your patience. My final question, I just didn't understand something in the presentation. As part of the process, you explained that taxes may change, but earlier in the presentation, you mentioned that taxes were a static percentage unless there was a boundary change or new construction. Could you just explain to me how the budget committee could affect taxes? I don't really understand the connection there.
Believe it or not, there are some cities that will not assess to their taxpayers the whole permanent tax rate. And it's very, very rare that this happens, but it has happened in the past. So where the cities is 4.8174, we calculate, believe me, the full usage of those property taxes that would be collected. A city may decide to only assess, 85% of that tax rate, something like that. So that is one way that a budget committee could influence that. The only other way that a tax rate would change would be if it was a local option levy that was held in September, and then it would be, there would be an ability to be able to initiate that local option levy being collected. So that is the only other way. I take that back. If there was a general obligation bond that had been voted on by the voters and that went into effect, then the tax rate to repay that general obligation bond would be a separate tax rate that was assessed against the residents of the city.
Awesome, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
And I think it's also important to note that if a budget committee chooses not to collect its full property tax rate, then you are essentially looking to management and saying, cut programs. And we have to come back and see what those ramifications would be to the fire department, the police department, our parks. So it is very rare, especially with Measure 50 in place, that cities don't collect their full property tax rate, but they do have the ability to make that decision.
Anessa and Riley Hartman.
Yeah, this is Riley. My question is, when can we expect to see the budget, or when will members of this committee see the budget? And will it be sent to us individually, and in what form, or will it, the first time we see it, be in a group setting?
You'll receive the budget document no later than 1 week before the May 3rd meeting. If I can get it out earlier to you, I will happily do so, but it will be out to you definitely by the week before. As far as how you will receive it, you'll be basically just the same as the council packets. We will have hard copies for you for each one of all 11 of the budget committee members. We'll have hard copies available, and it will also be available via PDF.
Okay,
and,
that's great. You answered my question.
Hi, it's Anessa. I just thank you for doing this. It's a lot of information. I just want to confirm that we're going to get this PowerPoint.
Yes.
Yes. Okay. And then you had rattled off a lot of numbers, specifically on the taxes side on the slide. I can't remember which number it was. I just have a note that says taxes. Will we get that information as well, like the percentages you were talking about?
Absolutely. There are also, what might be helpful, just a suggestion I would make, is if you wanted to look at the adopted budget for the current biennium, the one that we're closing up, you'll see that a lot of this information is listed in there, not only in the budget message, but also in the descriptions of the revenues, the funds, all that type of stuff. And again, that will be included in the budget that you'll be receiving a week before. As far as the numbers, if those are listed right into the PowerPoint, I don't know if I have those in there, but I will be happy to put those in the PowerPoint before we actually post it. Would that be all right, Jackie? Could we change it at this point and add that and ensure those are there? But absolutely.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, no, they weren't there. I'm sure they just live in your awesome memory. But I did not get a chance to write them down, but yes. Thank you so much.
Absolutely, I'll get those included in there.
Christy Haller-Schaefer.
So this is just kind of a curiosity thing. Since the pandemic just really came out of nowhere, how bad did it kerfluffle the budget that we approved last year? And are there going to be, because I mean, this may not go away for a while, and are we building in kind of cushions for the continuation on and dealing with the pandemic?
As far as the kerfluffle on our current budget, it was actually impacted at less than we thought it would, because of various little issues with the way we were getting the monies back in. We ended up having the appropriation in place to be able to offset almost all of the funds that we got for this initial CARES allocation that we had.
Nice.
I'm sorry?
I said nice.
Yes, it was. That was helpful. Going into this biennium, this new one, we just received notification last week, I believe it was, as far as what our anticipated amount is on this latest round of CARES funding that we'll be getting from the state. And that is one thing that Jackie and I will be sure is basically included within this new budget, what the estimated revenues will be, and it'll be offset by estimated expenditures, appropriations. We can't pinpoint exactly how those appropriations will be distributed yet, because we have not gotten the guidelines from the feds. It'll come from Treasury. And once we know what those guidelines are, we have a plan in place as far as how we can figure out how they can be spent. So the total amount might be included in the budget on both sides, meaning revenues and appropriations, but there won't be a definite spending plan finalized, most likely by the time we come with the proposed.
Okay, so the crystal ball isn't working quite yet.
No, because the federal government is, you know, they've issued dollar amounts, but they have not issued the guidelines for spending those dollar amounts. This was very similar to what happened with the initial round of funding too. It was actually updated 27 times before we were through with it all. So,
but Christy, I think to answer your question, when COVID hit, management did a timeout approach, and we were very conservative on how we spent our money. And we took information to the city council so they were updated. You know, we froze vacant positions. We didn't know what the revenue shortfalls were going to be. And then again, at the city council retreat in January, we updated the city council, and we've been very careful and thoughtful. The revenues aren't as shortfall as we thought that they were going to be. But I think what you will find going into this next budget is we are being very conservative with just trying to maintain our service levels for the next couple of years. So that is something that we're very proud that the management had the ability to see. We don't know how long we're going to be in this situation, and they really only spent money as we needed for that.
Mm-hmm.
That's great. Thank you.
There are no more hands up at this time.
Well, I know we gave you a lot of information, and I promise you that we are here to help you get through it. I think the important thing that I'd like you to know as well is that Gladstone has improved a great deal in how it's been transparent with how it's spending its money, and the audits have been coming out remarkably well. And whether you're a former counselor on this committee now or a current counselor, they can attest to the fact that Gladstone has really become a professional city that wants to be transparent about how they're spending their money. And I'm very proud of what we're going to be presenting to you. And I appreciate the time that you're putting into even learning how this budgeting law works with us. And we are very grateful to have Kathy's expertise as our finance consultant to get us through this. So we will send you the PowerPoint after Kathy puts in those numbers you requested. We will send you the budget calendar, and then you can email us with any questions you have leading up to when we get you the document before the May 3rd meeting. And if there is nothing else, then I will say thank you, everybody, and have a good night.